Hi, thank you. How are you all doing today? I hope it's great. I'm doing great. I'm very happy. So one tiny thing is that I am not a technical writer, I'm an engineer. And if you expected this talk to be two people, I'm sorry, it's just me today. My colleague could not make it, so it's all about me. You might want to go for the job fair if you prefer. So I am Polish, hence my name is a little bit awkward. I don't know if you know, HTML has this awesome Ruby tag for pronunciation, so use it a lot, it's very useful. And I learn by drawing things. And as an engineer, I have to learn a lot of things. And everyone in this room, as technical writers, as engineers, as project managers, as anyone on your job, you probably have to learn a lot. So I started learning to draw about a year ago when I got a tablet and I decided, hey, this is going to be fun. And I mostly draw things that I'm trying to understand better, like learning Haskell, which is an awesome functional programming language. It's pretty hard. Also, this is not how I draw, this is traced. This is how I draw. So if you're feeling any sort of stress around my drawing skills, just remember that. And I try to simplify and iconize things and make little jokes, like this is a maybe type in Haskell, which means this cat may be alive or dead, never know. And I also try to do it for learning languages, because English is not my first language, and it's extremely confusing. And as hard as Polish consonants were to pronounce, your vowels are just ridiculous. So this was my attempt at trying to remember how to pronounce these words, and please don't ask me, I still don't know. I asked 5 native speakers about how to pronounce them, and none of them gave me the same answer. This is confusing. So I'm trying to note that down for the future, so all the other non-native speakers will know English is confusing. And because learning takes a long time, learning a thing starts with thinking of learning about something, and then you acquire a lot of resources, and if you're me, you acquire a lot of aspirational resources, like, paint and watercolors and everything else that I will never use because I have no idea how to use that. And then you fail. Because, why would you not? If you're just learning a new skill, you will fail, and then you fail some more. And then you get a bit frustrated, and you think, hey, maybe I can't do this thing. But if you repeat it over time, and you go through this process, and you narrow things down, and maybe acquire different resources, or maybe just not buy stuff all the time, as I do, then you might start learning things more, and start learning things better. So I thought, hey, I want to learn to draw, but I'm an engineer, so how do I make it part of my job so they can pay me for learning the thing I want to do? And this brilliant idea had to be supported by some evidence, because I can't just go to my boss and say, hey, I'm going to draw half my time now, which I actually do, but shh, don't tell them. So there is precedence. There are technical zines that people write. Julia Evans is absolutely awesome, and she's creating zines about Linux and debugging and command line, and they're very friendly, and the drawings are about my level, so they're also not very intimidating. And she also created her own font, which I did too. So do that, it's awesome, and check out her comics. There is XKCD and the Kubernetes comics. I know there was a lightning talk by Tess yesterday, who also talked about it, so I feel like reinforcing that helps people understand how great it is. So explaining technical concepts in drawings, in zines, in comics, helps people be less intimidated, helps them understand and remember things better, and in general is a very positive thing to do. So I decided, yay, I have a precedence. There is also this concept of sketchnoting. So you draw ideas, not art. Also, yeah, this is the other Portland, just so you know. Yay, woo, Maine. I was hoping this was confusing, and I'm happy you're happy about it. So sketchnoting is this idea that you only need 5 elements to draw anything. If you iconize things, if you think about them in the simplest terms, if you can draw a circle, a square, a triangle, a line, and a dot, you're fine. You can draw anything. You just need practice and some failures along the way, but you can draw it, and you can conceptualize it, and you can share it with other people. So with all this evidence, I decided to communicate that to my team. So for me, it was pretty easy because I just started my job 6 months ago. So I came in drawing all the time, and everyone just assumed it's part of my job. So I told people, yeah, I'm doing it because I want to facilitate communication, and I want to engage and support learning for other people, because if drawings are cute, people are engaged, and they want to see those, back-end infrastructures or whatever things I'm doing at work. They also make documentation more engaging and appealing, and we already had some diagrams in our documentation, so that was a pretty easy sell. And we as engineers use it when we are debugging things, when we are whiteboarding, when we're thinking about things together. So it enables system thinking and problem solving, ideation, and all those nice words I had to put there to make my case. And also it's very fun. I know that's very subjective, because if people can't draw, they're like, I don't know what fun you have in that. But once you start doing a lot of that, it makes sense. So I devised a 5-step master plan because people have jobs. And that's the main problem with this. Like, you need a lot of time to get good at something. But people do other things. They have to be technical writers. They have to write code as engineers. They have to manage other people. They can't just suddenly say, hey, I'm going to spend half my day drawing things. And I figured, yeah, that makes sense. Like, you should be paid for the job you're doing. And I can't take away a focus. So I decided to enable other people to use drawings in ways that help them convey those ideas and explain them. So I started drawing a lot at work. I made a business case. I built a workflow for people to use in their own workflows and start using drawings. And I'm spreading the word, like, giving a conference talk is a way of spreading the word. And then, the last step is always do it over time. So let's dig into that. Drawing a lot. So I'm drawing a lot on my own, like learning the ukulele, I'm drawing the chords, learning languages. But it doesn't really make sense to do it on the job and say, yeah, I'm drawing a lot, so now I have this skill. You have to draw things that are relevant. So I started taking notes. Like, these are my notes about networking. So you can see there's like a cute little laptop talking to a cute little server, and they communicate a lot. And there's like TCP and IP happening all around, and they communicate in packets and like do SSL stuff. So those are my notes for actual programming, job-relevant things. And then I started doing presentations about those things at work. So when I'm explaining curl to people, I'm like, hey, you have a happy little terminal, and it gets a cookie from this happy little server. And everyone's like, yeah, that sounds fun. And then I started developing this visual language for AWS infrastructure. So you can have a happy little Lambda and a happy little CloudFront, and all those things are friends and they like talking to each other. And then you draw like actual infrastructure diagrams with that, because that's what I do for my job now. So this visual language helps people get engaged with the, the concepts that stand behind them, and also helps them think about them. A browser can be a client, and it does a lot of different things. But in a certain context, it's enough to have this picture in your mind and just go through the parts that are important. Because if you have this idea, this icon in your head, you can focus on the things that you're trying to learn and not constantly think and try to visualize other concepts. So you're chunking things up, and then you can connect those chunks, and they can be cute and happy. So then I started sharing it with my coworkers. JB is our design lead, so he decided to make it more, Mobify style friendly, because my drawings are not as professional. So he started taking my drawings and making them more professional and documentation ready. So that also happens, and people are very engaged and interested in doing that. So I feel like I've shown at work that drawing a lot makes sense and is relevant for my job. But I still needed to make a business case to work on it more. So I figured, hey, we already use diagrams. I'm just going to talk to people who do that to tell everyone else how they're doing this. So I started with engineers, because I am an engineer, and we do that a lot. We draw diagrams when we are pairing and explaining concepts to each other. We whiteboard things when we're debugging things and doing retrospectives. We try to communicate in this visual language. And we also have to create resources for other team members. So sometimes we have to open PowerPoint and do things, or whatever else we're using for that. So it's mostly like pen and paper and whiteboarding and some tools that we use from time to time when we need to create a diagram for someone else. And then I talk to technical writers, and they use diagrams a lot. They interview subject matter experts, and when they ask them about things, they draw and try to engage them and make diagrams. When they're reviewing things they learned from other people and the information they gathered, they also make diagrams and draw things to check their understanding. And they also like the color and the flair that it gives to the documentation, because we have a lot of diagrams. Those are usually diagrams created by our designers, so the current process is the technical writer would create a draft and then go to the designer with this draft, and the designer will create a beautiful SVG file and then make a PNG out of it, and then we put it in our docs. So the designer and sketch are like a very important step in this process to create professional grade drawings and diagrams. Also, salespeople use diagrams. So they present things a lot to customers, and they use those professional grade diagrams created by designers. But they also do back of a napkin conversation with prospective customers. And they need to draw something quickly and explain how a system works, and then have to explain to the customer how it fits with their system. So they do it a lot, and they do both very professional, beautiful, created resources that we all reuse in all our presentations, but they also have to sit down and draw things from scratch. So how can I add value in this process? Where can I put in those cute little whimsical drawings that don't really fit anywhere else? And reviewing this process, it makes sense. A lot of people are involved. We need to communicate with each other. There are a lot of resources that we are using, a lot of inputs. But this process is constantly changing. Like, our product is constantly changing. We need to improve those diagrams over and over again. And if we just do it by hand, drafting and redrawing things, we have to do the same job over and over again. Those documentation and presentation grade diagrams are created by designers who are very specialized in that, and they create beautiful things. And not saying we should replace that, because I don't think we can automate that process. But there is internal documentation. There's the communication that we have to do a lot every day. And maybe a process could fit there to help people do that and have it repeatable and have it reusable. And we have a lot of shared components. We have the same infrastructure. We don't really change it every other week. So if we could just reuse certain elements, that would be easier if we don't have to constantly think of ways of trying to visualize them. So I figured, this process of trying to communicate with people day to day, that seems like a place where I could help. So I started building a workflow. And I had to think of different value-adding ideas for this workflow, because I can't just be like, this is the tool you're going to use, because I decided it's the best tool, because I know best. So now you use that, and that's done. So I had to think of something that improves the flow. It's not like overly overwhelming. It's usable for all the team members. So it's not just you need to be an engineer and write code. It has to be usable by anyone. It has to be extendable, because tools are great, but sometimes you need to add this one feature, and waiting for them to add it in their product might be too long. So you just want to add it on your own. So it would be great if it was in a language that we as engineers can use and then improve whatever workflow we have. It should be able to be a part of an automated workflow, because we don't want to generate every diagram by hand to put it in our documentation. And there are also other ideas, like it would be great with open source, if we could version control it, if other projects used it, because if other projects are using it, there's a high chance it's going to survive the next few years, and we can use it still. And it would be fun if I had a cute logo, because then I can put it in diagrams. So there are many tools. I'm not saying, oh, I chose a tool and you should all use it, because that does not make sense. You should think about a tool that works for your workflow. If you want to go for it, if you want to use diagrams more, if you want to use more drawings, there is a plethora of tools you can choose from. There's D3, there's P5, there's Draw.io. I think every team should think about their own needs when they're trying to choose something. And another question that often comes up is, why don't we just build our own tool? And I'm like, yay, great idea. I think the main point here is you have to think about your core business value, about your core team product. We are building products for other engineers. We are building SDKs to build progressive web apps, and that's a mouthful on its own. And we need to build documentation around it, and we need to take care of that core product. So while it's great to build a new product because you control the code and you can do whatever you want there and it's perfect for your workflow, you need to write it so you have the alternative costs of people working on that instead of your product. You need to maintain it. You need to design it. As fun as it is to create something, it's extremely painful to maintain it. And we do it as our jobs anyway, so why would you want to add another thing here? And again, I'm not saying if you were to go for it, you can't build your own thing. You can. That's perfectly a reasonable choice if it makes sense for your team. What I'm saying is you have to focus on how is it adding value and where, and how much resources you should put into it. So at the end of the day, I decided to build a proof of concept, and I'm using Mermaid. Fun fact, Mermaid, named Sava, is the symbol of my city, Warsaw. So Mermaid does not have an icon, so I'm proposing a beautiful logo for it. I'm hoping they're going to accept it. And what Mermaid is an open source abstraction of a D3.js that can be used for generating SVG diagrams from Markdown-like syntax exposed via an API that runs in a headless browser environment. Got it? OK. I feel like this is like grade 24 or something. I don't know. So let's maybe review it in a human readable language. So it's open source, and it's in JavaScript. So we can write code for it, because our engineers write JavaScript. It uses Markdown-like syntax, and Markdown is great. Everyone knows Markdown on our team, and a lot of other people know Markdown. And also, Markdown can be version control. You can add it to Git. Diagram parts are HTML elements, so we can use CSS on them, and we can use JavaScript on them, because they're just HTML. It has a web interface, so you can go and type things there, and it will generate a diagram. So it helps people just use it out of the box. You don't have to install anything. You don't have to be an engineer. It has a command line tool, so it allows you to have an automated workflow. Diagrams can be saved as SVG, and then you can use it in your docs. And can be used in other tools. So it has a lot of downstream projects that are using Mermaid to generate diagrams and preview them, like Gatsby, and there is a Vim plugin, because there is a Vim plugin for everything. And there is a Sphinx extension and whatnot. So you can see the language here is pretty friendly. You are defining things, and you're pointing those things at other things, which is basically what a diagram is, I think. So it's pretty easy to get started with, and I'm going to show you. OK. So let me just switch things over here. Awesome. So this is my version of Mermaid. So I found a way of generating images and adding them in. This is CSS. This is the full declaration for putting images in. Once you have an image, you just create a CSS declaration that makes a background of your element, and then just put a link to it, and it works. So this is the extensibility of it being HTML and CSS. So I have like a little browser and a little server and a little proxy here, and I want to connect them in a way that makes sense for how proxying works, like on a very high level. So what I want to do is I want to tell this browser, hey, I want you to talk to this proxy. And it talks to the proxy, yay! So then I say to the proxy, hey, could you please talk to the server for the browser? And it talks to the server. And then I can do it the reverse way. So I can say, hey, server, when you're responding, just go to this proxy. And then the proxy is like, hey, browser, I have a response for you. I'm going to send it over. It has a few kinks, so it sometimes doesn't work as it's supposed to. Sometimes you have to add a space at the end for no reason. I don't know. And also, this might be like a clear enough diagram for people who know how it works, but you can also write more things. Like you can say, hey, the browser is requesting my website. And this is how this request works. And then the server is responding to the proxy with that HTML and CSS and whatever I'm putting in. Sorry, I forgot to put this thing. Awesome. So this is how you can create a diagram. And then you can save this text somewhere. And you can version control it. And you can reuse it. And this link is encoding the full diagram. So you can grab this link, send it to someone else. They can open the same website with this link, and they can edit this diagram and say, hey, actually, I think the proxy first, I don't know, maybe checks its cache or some sort of thing. So you say, hey, proxy, just talk to yourself and check your cache. And I am breaking things here. Oh, sorry. I am not thinking straight. Proxy talks to itself, and then it's checking the cache. Awesome. So you can add elements. Yay! You can add elements, you can create diagrams, and you can just write them in Markdown-like style. And you can share it with someone else, and they can edit that. And if you have cute, whimsical drawings, and you have a cute font, it can look like this. But if you want to have a more serious documentation, the only thing you need to do is you need to change the CSS. So this is my whimsy CSS that defines these icons. But I can go here and have very serious AWS icons here. And I can write about very serious AWS infrastructure. And it works exactly the same way. I can say, hey, client, go connect to CloudFront. And CloudFront is then going to talk to API Gateway. And API Gateway is then going to connect to the Lambda to retrieve your website. It's exactly the same thing. It just uses a different visual language. So this is a more professional grade communication than drawing cute things. And it's pretty easy to change things and make them even more explicit. I could say this is AWS Lambda, and this is a CloudFront edge location. And you get the idea. So I feel like this might be a friendly way for people to create diagrams, and might be a friendly way for them to open up and try sharing those things. And I'm going to switch things around. Just give me a second. OK. Awesome. Now everyone should be able to see me. So this is a work in progress still. This is still a POC. It has some good ideas, but it also has to work with other workflows we have. For example, our designers are using SVGs to create those professional-grade diagrams. This tool is generating an SVG, but it's cheating. So instead of creating a proper SVG that Vector tool can edit and work with, it's creating an HTML SVG. So it does not work well with Sketch or other tools. So we still need to think about either fixing that or maybe finding a different tool that works with this idea. It's still not part of our docs building process because it needs more beautiful CSS and it needs more thought put into which of those diagrams will we actually put into docs. The CSS elements need to be a bit tweaked to be on brand, and they need to be compliant with the visual language, and they need to be maintained. Because the visual language of a company is part of this brand that people are creating and working on, and they're reusing it. So if you're going to have another part of your visual communication, you need to define it and make sure it's maintained with all the rest of your code. And there are also a few issues upstream in the open source library I'm using here that needs to be fixed. Like generating SVGs with custom CSS does not exactly work in the CLI, and me fixing it in our local version of it does not really help long term. So this is not perfect, but this is good enough to give across the idea of, hey, we could create diagrams easily. Everyone could create them. We could have the same visual language. We can share them. We can edit them. We don't have to stress about drawing things or making things look a certain way. So then the next step is to tell that to everyone. I shared it with engineers on my team, and the most amazing thing happened, because I was like, if you need to create a diagram for documentation, this is what you use. And they said, hey, when I'm debugging things, I'm just going to make a diagram in this thing. And I'm going to try to understand which parts of the system I don't know. And I'm like, wow, this is an amazing thing that happened just because you were enabled to do it. And you don't have to think about it. You can just create this diagram, send it over to someone else, and say, hey, I don't understand how this one part of our system connects to something else. And they can explain it to you, and they can rework this diagram. I've done it a lot. I was creating internal docs for my team, and it turns out I did not understand many things. And then someone said, hey, this is actually now how things work, because Lambda edge is a different thing than a Lambda. And I'm like, whoa, that's a thing, that's interesting. So then I fixed it, because I had a wrong understanding of the system. And because I drew it and because I shared my understanding, I was able to get this response quickly. Also sharing it with the docs team, they are pretty excited about it, but they also have a lot of other things to work on. So this needs to be really ready to use in documentation for them to just use it every day. And sharing it with other teams, like our sales team or our marketing team, or whoever else might be interested in making diagrams. Like, to me, it seems now that everyone is just doing diagrams all the time. We just don't talk about it. I can also give a conference talk. That's like a thing. And I can use any opportunity to talk about it, like the writing day. So we did this impromptu table on Sunday, and it was pretty awesome. So to get started drawing things and to get started diagramming things, you don't even need a tool like this. You can just start drawing. You can just start writing a process. We all decided to work on how to do a GitHub pull request, just because it seems like a fun thing everyone is doing. And if you want to see more examples of what people worked on and resources we gathered and the conversation we had around this visual stuff, this sharing things and creating diagrams and communicating in a visual way, go to this document. Also, Tess had a lightning talk yesterday, and I just love this part of her comic of a person being extremely confused about someone's answer. And I think like this is me a lot of the times, like, yeah, great, that did not explain things. So check them out. They're pretty awesome. And then the last step is refactor, repeat, and rejoice. Because this is not a done thing. A workflow is not a thing you can just put to people and say, this is what you use. A workflow is something people use, and they improve on, and then they change things. So this is not something I'm just going to say to them, it's how you're going to do it, because I know best. And I keep getting feedback, and it keeps being improved. And what I'm hoping with this presentation is that it's going to encourage you to think about that, about how you can add a visual language to your documentation, to your processes, to your workflows, and how you can encourage your team and add value to their work so that it helps them communicate and it helps them do their jobs better, because at the end of the day, we are all working and we all have jobs. So go and draw your docs if you want to. Thank you.